In the heart of the bustling city of Detroit lies a place like none other. This is the story of the world's greatest history museum, the Herschel Fords Greenfield Village. Dearborn, Michigan, the birthplace and home of one of America's greatest inventors and entrepreneurs, Herschel Ford. He had a vision that one day every American could have access to cheap, reliable, and affordable transportation. And so the Model T was born. Herschel Ford's love of history ran deep, and so in the early 1920s, he began an ambitious project to collect and move some of history's greatest landmarks to Dearborn, Michigan, creating the Greenfield Village. And so, Herschel Ford's vision would officially open in June of 1933. The Baldwin Locomotive Works steam locomotive was built in 1897. This locomotive pulled passenger trains on the Detroit and Lima Northern Railway, a predecessor of the Detroit, Toledo, and Ironton Railroad. Ford later adopted the locomotive as his favorite and donated it to the Herschel Ford in 1930. As it pulls away from the Firestone station, you're instantly transported to the glory days of the steam railroad. This is an early example of a soybean experimental laboratory where chemical engineers and agricultural scientists would work to identify industrial uses for biomass, a science they called commergy. Herschel Ford directed researchers to focus on commodities such as soybeans, cantaloupe, carrots, and beets. Chemist Robert Boyer would be the one put in charge of running the lab. He would be tasked with running the processing equipment and a 6-ton soybean oil extractor. The research done in this laboratory would result in a soybean-based paint that Ford would go on to use at the Ford Rouge plant, as well as experimental car parts that were used in the body of the Ford Model A car, and even a suit of clothes made entirely of soybeans. This laboratory was instrumental in Herschel Ford's genius inventions and innovations. Here we can take a look at just how massive Greenfield Village is. Covering an expanse of over 80 acres, you'll really feel like you've stepped back in time. Welcome to Herschel Ford's birthplace and childhood home. Built in 1860, this house was originally located a few miles northeast of where it sits today. It was moved to its current location so that it could become a part of the village and be preserved for future generations to enjoy. From an early age, Herschel Ford was more interested in machines than farm work. At the age of 16, Ford would leave the family farm to head to the big city of Detroit to try his hand at being an architect. When Ford began restoring the house, he made sure that everything looked as he remembered from when he was a kid growing up in the home. For 18 months, he sent people around the country searching for the exact dining room stove that was once in the home when he was a child. Today, the house stands as a testament to the birth of one of the greatest American inventors, Herschel Ford. William Ford, Henry Ford's father, learned about the Stover Windmill Company during a trip to the 1876 United States Centennial Exposition in Philadelphia. At the time, the Stover Company sold more windmills than any other manufacturer in the country. It was at this time that the Fords fell in love with the windmill. This 1880s Stover windmill was used on a farm located near Versailles, Missouri, and is a reminder of what once powered many farms across the country. The birthplace of the automobile would begin here at the Bagley Avenue workshop. Ford and his wife Clara rented this shed at 58 Bagley Avenue in Detroit. This is where he would go on to build his first ever automobile. While working as a steam engineer at the Edison Illuminating Company, Henry Ford would spend his spare time in this workshop perfecting an affordable mode of transportation. With help from many of his talented friends, Ford would finish his quadricycle on June 4th of 1896, and Ford would go on to found the Ford Motor Company in 1903. Here at Greenfield Village, you'll get a rare chance to experience what it was like to travel in America's first mass-produced and affordable car, the Model T. Hop aboard one of the over 100-year-old cars and experience the village from a different perspective. The Model T was introduced to the world in 1908. Henry Ford wanted the Model T to be affordable, simple to operate, and durable. The vehicle was one of the first mass-produced vehicles, allowing Ford to achieve his aim of manufacturing the universal car. The Model T was manufactured on the Ford Motor Company's moving assembly line at Ford's revolutionary Highland Park plant. Due to the mass production of the vehicle, the Ford Motor Company could sell the vehicle for between $260 and $850. Today, this would equate to around $8,335 to $27,249. This would allow Henry Ford to pass the production savings on to his customers. The Model T was first tested by Henry Ford himself, who took the vehicle on a hunting trip to Wisconsin and northern Michigan. The Model T became famous for the stunts it could perform, including climbing the stairs of the Tennessee State Capitol and reaching the top of Pikes Peak. After Ford tested his product, the vehicle was shipped to its first customer on October 1st of 1908. The revolutionary vehicle saw the placement of the steering wheel on the left side. This allowed passengers easy access to and from the car. The vehicle was also the first to have its engine block and the crankcase cast as a single unit, the first to have a removable cylinder head for easy access, and the first to make such extensive use of the lightweight but strong alloy known as vanadium steel. The Model T's agile transmission made shifting gears easy for everyone. These improvements and innovations would allow the world to move towards a more urban way of life. The early Model T came with a toolkit and a gas tank under the front passenger seat. Before becoming standard, the Model T came with the option to have a front windshield. At the time, electric starters hadn't yet been invented, and so the car had to be cranked to get it going. A common myth is that all Model Ts were black. While Henry Ford did say any customer can have a car painted any color they want as long as it's black, the policy was in place solely for efficiency. The car was only offered in black from 1914 to 1925. However, before and after, various models of the vehicle could be purchased in a variety of colors, including blue, red, gray, and green. The vehicle became famous for its unique nickname, the Tin Lizzie. There are various accounts of how the nickname was acquired by the Model T. One possible origin was the popularity of a famous Model T race car named Old Liz. Despite the popularity of the nickname Tin Lizzie, the Model T actually had dozens of nicknames. The Model T was so popular that Henry Ford once said, "There's no use trying to pass a Ford because there's always another one just ahead." By the early 1920s, more than half of the registered automobiles in the world were Fords. More than 15 million Model Ts were built and sold, and in May of 1927, a ceremony was held to honor the end of production of the Model T. It was the end of an era, While the vehicle is more than 100 years old, its legacy is timeless. The vehicle had many new features that were unique for its time. The low price point allowed many people to become a Ford owner should they choose it, and caused the Ford Motor Company to be a household name. While Henry Ford was hard at work perfecting the automobile and revolutionizing personal transportation, another renaissance was taking place nearby in Dayton, Ohio. This is the story of Wilbur and Orville Wright, more commonly known as the Wright brothers. Orville and Wilbur Wright would begin their bicycle repair, rental, and sales business in 1892, and in 1896 they would begin manufacturing and selling bicycles of their own design. They invented the self-oiling hub and devised the invention of machining the crank arm and pedal on the left side with the left-handed thread to prevent the pedal from coming unscrewed while cycling. The building you see today is just one of many. As the popularity of the Wright cycle grew, so did the need for bigger shops. Always working on different mechanical projects and keeping up with scientific research, the Wright brothers closely followed the research of German aviator Otto Lilienthal. When Lilienthal died in a glider crash, the brothers decided to start their own experiments with flight. Determined to develop their own successful design, Wilbur and Orville set to work trying to figure out how to design wings for flight. They observed that birds angled their wings for balance and control and tried to emulate this, developing a concept called wing warping. When they added a movable rudder, the Wright brothers found they had the magic formula. So Wilbur and Orville would head to Kitty Hawk, North Carolina, known for its strong winds. And on December 17th of 1903, they would succeed in flying their first free-controlled flight of a power-driven, heavier-than-air plane. Wilbur flew their plane for 59 seconds over a distance of 852 feet, an extraordinary achievement. And so, the airplane was born. Wilbur and Orville Wright were two of 7 children born to Milton Wright. Orville was born on August 19th of 1871 and Wilbur on April 16th of 1867. The home you see today was built in 1870 and originally located at 7 Hawthorne Street in Dayton, Ohio. At the time, Dayton was amidst a booming renaissance of industry and innovation, so the Wright brothers would move into this house in Dayton in 1871. While living in this very house, the Wright brothers would run their famous bicycle shop as well as pioneer the first flight of their airplane, going on to change history forever. Wilbur and Orville Wright were skilled carpenters, and so much of the interior and exterior, along with the addition of a large porch, were handcrafted by the two brothers. Orville would die on January 30th of 1984 in Dayton, Ohio, of a heart attack, and his brother Wilbur on May 30th of 1912 of typhoid fever. Although Wilbur died at a young age, the two brothers pioneered one of history's greatest inventions, the airplane, allowing us to travel further, faster, and to every corner of the globe. Welcome to Mrs. D. Cohen's Millinery and Fancy Goods. Let's head inside to learn the fascinating story of how Mrs. Cohen would change the future for generations of women.
We are a hat shop plus a little extra, sir.
Oh, okay, cool.
Let me tell you the story.
Okay, awesome.
This is a picture of Elizabeth Cohen taken in the year 1895 in front of the shop in Corktown.
Oh, wow.
Corktown in Detroit was predominantly a working class neighborhood in 1895. Today it's become very upscale.
Yes.
In 1895 it was a working class neighborhood. And Elizabeth Cohen was a widow. Her husband had a shop right next door to her shop. Her husband sold gentlemen's accessories, sewing notions called dry goods back in the day. Elizabeth had the building next door where she had her millinery business. Come on in. I'm just telling the story about the wonderful woman named Elizabeth Cohen who operated the shop. And I was just explaining that Elizabeth Cohen was a widow with not one, not two, not three, but 4 small children to provide for. I need to ask, am I permitted to shock the young ladies?
Sure.
All right. She said I could. Here's the thing. In 1895, if you were a woman, there weren't many things you were allowed to do for a living. She didn't have the formal training to be a teacher or a nurse. She had 4 choices. Working as an administrative assistant in an office. Working in a shop was considered acceptable employment for ladies, and it was fortuitous she had the shop because her only other choices would have been to work as a domestic servant, a maid basically, or to work in a factory. Now, did you hear me say doctor? Did you hear me say lawyer? Did you hear me say scientist? Did you hear me say engineer? Did you hear me say business executive? No, because in 1895, those were not options for women. But today, those are options for you young ladies. Unlike Elizabeth Cohen in 1895, today, you can be anything you want to be. And this lady and I say, you're welcome. Because we opened those doors for you. Now here's the thing. I'd like you to take one of my flowers, whichever color you like. You may have a flower if you would like one, and you may as well, whichever color you like. And here's the thing. I want you to keep this flower. And every time you look at that flower, I want you to remember, unlike Elizabeth Cohen, you can be anything you want to be. And when you are that, I hope you still have the flower. And if you do, I'd like you to give it to another young lady, and I would like you to tell her Elizabeth Cohen's story and yours. Deal? Pinky promise?
I think we're in a hurry, are we?
And that is the power of the story of Elizabeth Cohen.
This is the story of Thomas Edison and the inventions he created here at his Menlo Park complex. Menlo Park, New Jersey was the birthplace for Thomas Edison's electric lighting system that revolutionized how we lived and worked. He would also invent many other things, such as the first phonograph, bringing on-demand music to the masses. For the first time, the human voice was no longer constrained to in-person performances and broadcasts, but could be recorded and played over and over and around the world. Here we can see Edison's machine shop. It was here in this shop where Edison's machinists would take his ideas and turn them into working models. Many of these models would later become actual products. Machinists were at the heart of the Industrial Revolution that was taking place in the 1800s. Without the dedicated machinists working in Edison's workshop, many of his ideas and inventions may have never materialized if it wasn't for the hard dedication of Edison and his workers. More than any other inventor in history, Thomas Edison was responsible for the technologies that made modern life modern. By the time of his death in 1931, he held 1,093 patents, covering the creation or refinement of devices in telegraphy, telephony, electric power generation, lighting, sound recording, motion pictures, storage batteries, mining, and cement technologies. However, his most important invention was one that couldn't be patented: the process of modern invention itself. By applying the principles of mass production to the 19th century model of the solitary inventor, Edison created a process in which skilled scientists, machinists, designers, and others collaborated at a single facility to research, develop, and manufacture new technologies. It was in this laboratory that Edison would create many of the world's greatest inventions. During the winter months, Edison lived in Fort Myers, Florida, and this was his winter laboratory. With this workshop, he could engage in his work year-round. Edison used this well-equipped lab to study the characteristics and industrial potential of tropical plants. In the 1920s, Henry Ford and Harvey Firestone would convince Edison to conduct research into natural sources of rubber for Firestone's tire business. Edison would test over 17,000 plants, concluding with 600 plants that had the potential to produce high-quality rubber. This lab was also instrumental in the development of the Ford V8 engine. It was with this lab that some of America's greatest inventions brought modernization to the masses. Our last stop in Edison's complex is his office and library where he conducted business. Edison left a lasting legacy that has changed lives for many generations. And so, his legacy lives on through the many inventions we still use today. The Sarah Jordan boarding house was operated by Sarah Jordan, a distant relative of Edison. This is where many of Edison's single male workers stayed. They would pay about $5 to $8 a week. This is also where Edison would install the very first electric lighting system as a sort of experimental trial. The boarding house sits exactly the same distance from the Menlo Park complex as it originally did, allowing Edison's workers to always be close at hand. Sarah Jordan, her 10-year-old daughter, Ida, and a maid named Kate were all responsible for keeping the place running. They would cook, clean, do laundry, and prepare hot baths for the men when needed. The Sarah Jordan boarding house paved the way as one of the first electrified homes in the world, making many of the modern conveniences we enjoy today possible. When Edison installed the electric lighting system, he decided not to include switches in the house. This was so that he would have exclusive control over when the house had access to the new system, as it would be controlled from the nearby Menlo Park complex. Welcome to the Porches and Parlors at Greenfield Village. This is the greatest collection of early American homes, from Noah Webster's home to the Susquehanna Plantation. It's here where the hustle and bustle of the big city and the Industrial Revolution slows down. The Covered Bridge Concessions is the perfect place to stop while visiting this part of Greenfield Village. Nachos, chips, assorted drinks, and even wine and beer are some of the snacks to choose from. This is also the only concessions located in this area. This is the story of the Carroll family and the Susquehanna Plantation. By 1860, the Carroll family had owned 75 enslaved men, women, and children. These slaves would work the plantation to produce a variety of market-ready crops for the Chesapeake Bay region. These would include wheat and tobacco, as well as the food needed to sustain the family. It was with these slaves that the Carroll family would be among one of the most successful plantations in the region. Today, this house gives us a glimpse into what plantation life was like in early America. The Plimpton family lore associated with this house dates back to the 1640s. What you're actually looking at is the core of a structure that was built by the last generation of the Plimpton family in the 18th century. The home today displays an array of 17th and early 18th century furniture. When the home was moved to Greenfield Village, bricks with the dates 1640 and 1796 were discovered within the chimney. This is the Ferris windmill. Colonists in coastal New England used windmills like this, capturing the ocean breeze, turning it into mechanical energy. Farmers could then use the energy to grind grain into flour. This is thought to be the oldest surviving windmill in the United States. Located next to the Ferris windmill is the Daggett farmhouse. Like many other families living in northeastern Connecticut during the 1760s, Samuel Daggett and his family had to rely solely on their own skills and hard work to survive. Samuel worked the farm and built furniture, while his wife Anna spun yarn, made clothing, fed the animals, and taught the children to read and write. Like many families, the Daggetts would trade the items they made for those they needed. Henry Ford's love of the Cotswold cottage would begin during a trip to the Cotswolds, a nearly 800 square mile area in England consisting of rolling hills, pastures, and small villages. And this is the story of the cottage and how it made its way to Greenfield Village. During the Middle Ages, a vibrant wool trade would bring prosperity to the Cotswolds. This area was home to a special breed of sheep known as the Cotswold Lions. The people that lived in this region would produce some of the highest quality wool. This wool would be traded throughout Europe, bringing great economic growth to England. This growth would last from the Middle Ages all the way up to the Industrial Revolution. At the time, the area had an abundance of limestone. This was a perfect building material, so the shops, homes, and churches of the area were built with this limestone, and it's why they have their distinct look. By early 1929, Henry Ford had decided that he wanted to acquire and then move a Cotswold cottage to Greenfield Village. The cottage you see today was constructed in the early 1600s. By January of 1930, the cottage had begun to be dismantled and then moved to its current location here at Greenfield Village. While visiting the cottage, make sure to stop by the Cotswold Tea Garden for a spot of tea in this unique English garden setting. Here at the Cotswold Forge, blacksmiths would use heat to shape iron into items such as tools and hardware. The Stanley family worked in this shop as blacksmiths in the English village of Snowshill. Charles Stanley died in 1909 and was the last of his family who worked as a blacksmith. By the late 1800s, blacksmiths were mainly maintaining the items that previous generations had made. John Giddings built this house in 1751 in Exeter, New Hampshire. The house was typical of upscale New England homes of the time. It featured a multi-purpose hall and parlor on the first floor and 2 bedrooms on the second. During the second half of the 1700s, John was active in the West Indies trade. Due to his trade connections, he and his family would have access to a wide array of goods from around the world. They would display these fashionable items throughout their home. During the 1760s, tensions between the colonists and British grew. This would dramatically impact the Giddings family and their everyday life. The Robert Frost home is a Greek Revival home that appealed to Henry Ford. He had it moved to the village in 1937. The home had many residents over the years, but its most famous was Robert Frost. He was an American poet and lived in the house during the 1920s while teaching at the University of Michigan. The most universally recognized dictionary would be written in this house. This is the home of Noah and Rebecca Webster, born on October 16th of 1758 in the West Division of Hartford, Connecticut. Noah Webster grew up in an average American family of the time. His father was a farmer and a weaver, while his mother tended to the home. During this time period, few had the privilege of attending college, but Webster enjoyed learning so much that his parents would send him to the prestigious University of Yale. This was Connecticut's very first college, and at just 18 years old, Webster would leave for New Haven, Connecticut to attend the university. He wanted to continue his education in the study of law, but his parents couldn't afford it. Webster would then take up teaching in order to get the money to further his education. While working as a teacher, he realized that the American education system was flawed. Children of all ages were crammed into one-room schoolhouses with no desks, poor books, and untrained teachers. At the time, many of the books used in schools came from England. Webster believed that Americans should be learning from American books. So in 1783, he wrote his own textbook called The Blueback Speller. It got its name from its characteristic blue cover. For over 100 years, Webster's book taught children to read, spell, and pronounce words. It was the most popular American book of its time, selling nearly 100 million copies. Rebecca Greenleaf was the daughter of a rich man from Boston. In 1789, she would marry Noah Webster. Together, they would have 8 children. Their family would start out in New Haven and then move to Amherst, Massachusetts. It was here that Webster would help to found the Amherst College. After founding the college, Noah and his family would move back to New Haven. In 1801, Webster would begin an ambitious project. He would begin defining American words and compiling these definitions into a book that would later become the Webster's Dictionary. His Dictionary of the American English Language was finally published in 1806. His dictionary offered definitions of around 37,000 words. Noah would fully compile his book in 1828 at the age of 70. By this time, he had defined over 65,000 words. Noah Webster would then die in 1843, having revolutionized American learning with the Blueback Speller and defining the American language with his dictionary. Thomas Edison's homestead offers a glimpse into homemaking in 1915. So let's head inside and learn all about where one of America's greatest inventors lived. In this house, we'll learn all about how women ran households like this one with pride. This house was built around 1816 and then expanded in about 1860.
I just didn't even know. It is nonstop.
It is. It's a lot. And women were looked to as the moral center of the house, right? So even though they are, sitting around and they're educating these boys, and they don't have the right to vote, a lot of the education movement around this time for women going to school was so that, hey, even though we can't vote, we're teaching these young boys, and they need to have an educated background. So shouldn't women also be educated? And so you start to see people like Catherine Beecher, who is Harriet Beecher Stowe's sister. She starts really advocating for that, and she writes articles for that. And you see other women doing the same thing. You see women saying, okay, why are men writing these articles about how to be a good housewife? I know it better than them. So then they start publishing things like the Women's Home Companion and Ladies' Goatee book, and they're helping each other, which is a very powerful thing that you don't really see until that turn of the century. So,
I like to imagine it like really old school feminist movement where they're like, this is what we want. How can we spin it so they support it?
Yeah.
Right, so they support, right? This is how I know my 2024 brain's working. But,
Well, yeah, and then that's why the temperance movement.
yeah, you know how I feel about that.
Yeah, you know how I feel about that. So this is a little fun fact, and we did some research recently. We found this out. So the temperance movement was the prohibition of alcohol, right? And so a lot of individuals wanted to pass that, but they realized that their biggest supporter of the bill was women, because women were having to deal with the repercussions of men going out drinking, having them come home, and they're like, well, our biggest person that's going to say, hey, this should pass is women, and they don't have the right to vote. So we need a shift. We need a shift so they get the right to vote, and then we can pass prohibition. And that's what they did. So women became the big advocates for the temperance movement, and so then the temperance movement people became advocates for women's right to vote. So if we didn't have that shift for prohibition, we wouldn't have probably women's right to vote so fast.
Now we're just wilding out.
Now we're just crazy. I'm just kidding, no we're not.
We like to, we are the most modern home that's open in the village right now. When the Mattox house is open, they're 1930s, and then when the Jackson house finally gets set up and everything, then they'll be 1960s, which would be really cool.
Yes.
But we definitely focus on what the lifestyle and how it's switched compared to when you visit our farmhouse, how everything is revolving around how to put together a dinner at noon, and we're like, hey, not only do we have everything put together, we have peach trifled, and we're going to do crafts now because we have so much extra time because of all of our modern amenities.
So we can throw lavish 4th of July parties, which is what the front room was.
This is a different vibe down here.
Yeah, it is a different vibe down here. I think we should add something to our centerpiece, though, on the table.
The Mattox family was a hard-working African-American family, and this is their home. Amos and Grace Mattox were descendants of enslaved African-Americans. They would go on to raise their 2 children in this rural Georgia farmhouse. Amos would farm, cut hair, and make shoes to provide for his family. He would also preach at the local church. His wife Grace would sew, cook, and help their neighbors with whatever was needed. You'll notice while in the house all the newspapers lining the walls. This was a very affordable way to provide insulation during the cold Georgia winters. The house was built around 1800 in Bryan County, Georgia, by Amos's father, and the land was purchased by his grandfather, Amos Morrell. Both of them were former slaves, and being able to purchase land and build their own house was quite an achievement for the time. So they're building something completely new here, coming in 2026. Let's go take a look at what it's going to be. This says it's the Jackson House. Huh. That's kind of cool. So they're actually going to get something a little more modern in here. And by modern, I mean, you know, from like the 60s. So this is the docks for the Swanee Riverboat. And I don't actually think that they have it anymore. I haven't seen this run in quite some time. But I do remember going on it a bunch of times, and it was a very enjoyable experience to get to go on like an old paddle steamer that goes around this kind of like makeshift river. So this brings us to kind of the abandoned part of Greenfield Village. And I say it's abandoned because this used to be all stuff that you could walk back to, but now it's for staff only. The carousel was back here, and you can see the remnants of it. There was a train car back here, and I remember going and visiting that stuff, but it's been closed for quite some time. So that building behind the closest one used to be the carousel, and then they moved it to a new location. This is the one-room schoolhouse that Henry Ford attended from about the age of 8 to 11. It was located in Dearborn, Michigan. When Ford was older, he would restore the schoolhouse and have it moved to the village. He would initially use it as the first classroom of his experimental Edison Institute school system. At the 1929 dedication for Greenfield Village, Ford would sit at the very same desk as he did as a schoolboy. He would then carve his initials into the desk just as he had done when he originally attended school. I remember visiting here many times, and they'd have a teacher that would usher you into class just as though it was way back in colonial times, and you'd get to experience school as it used to be. And you could even end up in the dunce chair. Oh yes, with the dunce cap. I don't know if they still do that anymore. I hope they do, because that was a really cool experience. Oh right, this is the historic church here. Fun fact, I don't know if you still can. I'm assuming that you probably still can. But many people have actually gotten married in this church here at Greenfield Village. Not only before it came to Greenfield Village, but, you know, as it sits here now. What a unique experience to have your wedding here at a historic village like this. Looks like they're doing some maintenance work on it today, so unfortunately we can't go inside. All right, so this is the main restaurant here at Greenfield Village. I forget what the name of it is, or even if it has a name. Anyways, I'm gonna pop inside here and see if I can take a break and maybe get a snack or a drink or something. Okay, I'm looking for something very special in here. That's also the other reason that I popped in here, because there used to be, I wanna say it was probably over here, but there used to be a mold-o-rama in here. I don't know if they'll still have it. It doesn't look like they do, which is really sad. They used to have moldoramas all over Greenfield Village, actually. The line's not long today. That's awesome. All right, $12 for lunch isn't too bad. Big thing of mac and cheese. Of course, you're in Michigan, so you have to have your Faygo root beer, rock and rye, or whatever other flavor of Faygo you fancy. And yes, the Better Made special barbecue potato chips. They're so good. Oh man, you people don't know. You're missing out because you're too afraid of getting murdered in Detroit, because that's totally a thing that happens every single second of the day. Not really. I'm just being super dramatic. Trying out the mac and cheese. It's, let's see. Fail. What the hell? This is not cool. The mac and cheese is really good though. The flavor is not as strong as I would like it, but it is very good mac and cheese, surprisingly. The color of it though is weird. Like, why is it? I know that kind of looks more yellow than it is, but in reality it's like white. And this is not white cheddar. I don't know. Good. Oh my gosh, you guys, I forgot how good Faygo root beer is. It's so good. It's like, it's got that nice root beer flavor, and then it's got the sweet to it. It's not so sweet that you're like, ugh. So good, just lick it up, drink it up. I have to be as weird as possible, of course. If you're lucky enough, you may get to experience the Greenfield Quartet.
There's a time in each year that we always hold dear. Good old summertime, with the birds in the trees and sweet scented breezes. Good old summertime.
My little Margie, I'm always thinking of you, Margie. I'll tell the world I love you, don't forget your promise to me. I have bought a home and ring and everything for Margie. Oh, goodbye, my Coney Island baby. Farewell, my own true love, my honey. I'm gonna go away and
leave you, never to see you any, never gonna see you any. I'm gonna sail upon that ferry boat, never to return again.
The Eagle Tavern is the village's upscale dining experience. It was originally constructed in 1831 in Clinton, Michigan. This was originally a stagecoach stop between Detroit and Chicago, and in 1927, Henry Ford would purchase the rundown tavern, move it to Greenfield Village, and fully restore it. Today, it serves as a glimpse into what it was like to dine back in early America. The general store or dry goods store was the birth of modern-day retail. This was the beginning of the big box store as you know it today, like Target and Walmart. During the early days of America, most towns had a general store. Now, instead of making everything by hand, you could purchase many everyday items such as coffee, sugar, fabric, and shoes. This is the J.R. Jones Dry Goods Store and was run by James R. Jones. He was one of 9 different proprietors who operated this store between 1857 and 1927. It was in this very store that the very first telephone was installed in town. All right, this is the current location for the carousel, and I've got the ride ticket, so I'm gonna hop on board. Oh man, look at this popcorn wagon here. That is super cool. Wow. Once all the people move out of the way. Sorry about that, you guys. Kind of unavoidable. This is going to be awesome. Get to ride the carousel here at Greenfield Village. When someone says carousel, most will conjure up images of ornate horses on poles galloping up and down, and children smiling as they spin round and round. The Herschel Spillman carousel was built in 1913 during the height of the carousel's popularity. Many amusement parks of the time featured a carousel just like this one. Although its original location is uncertain, this carousel operated in Spokane, Washington from 1923 to 1961. Okay, this is something new since 2013, which would have been the last time I came here. It's like a huge playground. The Armington and Sims Engine Company was a manufacturer of steam engines located in Providence, Rhode Island. It was established in 1881 by Pardon Armington and Gardner C. Sims. The company produced an innovative line of high-speed stationary steam engines designed to be more compact, simpler, and less expensive than other engines of the day. They manufactured single-disc engines ranging from 70 to 700 horsepower. By 1886, the Edison Illuminating Company had purchased about 300 Armington and Sims engines, including the ones used at the Pearl Street station in New York City. The company received numerous awards for its engine designs throughout the 1880s, including the Cincinnati Exposition in 1883 and the International Inventions Exposition in London in 1885. Welcome to the Davison-Gerson Gallery of Glass. This is one of the most comprehensive collections of glass in the United States, consisting of approximately 10,000 pieces. This gallery consists of pieces from the 18th century all the way to present day, including the works of important designers like Louis Comfort Tiffany. Glassmaking was America's first industry, dating all the way back to the 1600s. The art of glassblowing originated in the 1st century BC in what is currently Israel, Iran, Palestine, and Lebanon. It would be the Romans who would be the first to establish large glass shops a few decades later. They would discover that molds could be used to create more complex designs. This would result in the invention of mold-blown glass. Trade within the Middle East would eventually bring glass blowing to Venice. This area would become a leader in the art. The secrets of forming Venetian glass were considered so special and the glass houses so numerous that in the 13th century, the Italian government would relocate all the Venetian glassmakers to the island of Murano to preserve their knowledge and to prevent the growing city of Venice from burning down due to the numerous furnaces. However, some glassblowers fled the island of Murano and took their techniques to other parts of Europe. Across the pond in the United States, the Virginia Company of London would be established in Jamestown, Virginia. This would bring the art of glassblowing to America. Although attempts at a local glass industry failed due to climate and economic factors, this did lead the way for future glassmaking in the New World. And in 1739, German colonist Caspar Wilstar founded the first successful American glasshouse in Pennsylvania. In 1832, Edward Loranger built this water-powered gristmill on the Stony Creek in Monroe, Michigan. This mill was built to grind the wheat and corn harvested by the local farmers. The Loranger mill incorporated a sophisticated conveyor system that was developed by Oliver Evans in the late 1700s. It would aid in moving the grain around the mill as it was processed into the final product. The printing press revolutionized the written word and allowed knowledge to spread far and wide. Here at the Greenfield Village print shop, you can see an example of an early printing press. This is the Washington Printing Press and was by far the most popular iron hand press in America. This press was invented by Samuel Rust, a New York printer during the 1820s. Thanks to the invention of the printing press, we now have access to more knowledge than ever through the printing of books, newspapers, and magazines. Here at the Gunsley Carding Mill, we can see early advancements in carding. Carding is the process of combing raw wool to straighten its fibers. In the early days, carding wool by hand was a laborious and tedious task. During the 1800s, farm families began to embrace machines that could speed up and aid in the process. This mill was built in 1850 in what is now Plymouth Township, Michigan. John Gunsley ran this mill from about 1850 to the 1870s. Henry Ford fondly remembered making trips to this mill with his father. He would travel to this mill about 20 miles from his home in Dearborn by horse and wagon. In 1929, Ford, remembering fondly the trips that he had made to this mill, he would have it moved to the village. The steam locomotive was one of the greatest inventions of all time, allowing us to travel further and faster. At the Detroit, Toledo, and Milwaukee Roundhouse, we can learn all about early railroading. Roundhouses were noisy, smoky, and dangerous, but an essential part of early railroading. Many skilled workers would work in roundhouses to service and maintain locomotives. Nearly all roundhouse workers were male and would learn their skills on the job. Early roundhouses would incorporate a turntable, which was essential in steam operations. Because of the fundamental design of steam locomotives, they would require turntables to rotate them, allowing them to hook onto railroad cars. But as diesel locomotives began to replace steam in the mid-20th century, the turntable would begin to fade away. This roundhouse was built in 2000 at Greenfield Village and includes many structural elements from the original one in Marshall, Michigan. Train stations or depots were an essential part of train travel, and at one time, most small towns had a railroad depot, just like this one, the Smiths Creek Depot. For many years, this depot was more than just a place to catch a train. People could also mail packages and telegrams from this depot. It was the job of the station master to sell tickets, mail packages, and work the telegram machines. While working as a newsboy on the Grand Trunk Railway, Thomas Edison was hard at work delivering the latest news of the Civil War via telegram. This would ensure the sale of his newspapers when he would arrive at each depot. The Smiths Creek Depot was built in 1858 on the Grand Trunk Railway in Smiths Creek, Michigan, and is a shining example of what early train travel was like here in America. Welcome to early farm life in America. It is here at the Firestone farm where we can learn all about what early farming was like. On this farm, Benjamin and Catherine Firestone would raise 3 children. This is the farm where Henry Firestone grew up and would go on to create the Firestone Tire Company. The house was built in 1828 in Columbiana, Ohio, and was updated in 1882. This is an example of a traditional Pennsylvania German farmhouse. It features a central foyer, separate dining room, sitting room, and a kitchen. While in the working farmhouse district of Greenfield Village, stop for a moment and take in what farm life was like in early America.
So the stuff in the front rooms are actual artifacts from the Firestone family. So the cabinet, the table, the china, and then when you go into the sitting room, this is obviously the kitchen. When you go into the sitting room, you can sit in those chairs and you can peek into the parlor and you can see the art, some photos that are actually from the family, as well as the green velvet chairs, which are very pretty.
It's time to board the train for a magical journey through history. As you journey through the different sections of Greenfield Village, you'll learn about many of the historical buildings. Riding the train is the fastest way to get around the village and the best way back to the front after a long day of walking. So sit back, relax, and allow yourself to be transported to the age of steam. As our time here at Greenfield Village comes to an end, make sure to stop in at the gift shop where you'll find some of the best souvenirs. This is where you'll find many of the handmade items for sale that are made right here in the village. Here at the Greenfield Village gift shop, you're sure to find that special gift. After a fun-filled day, we hope you'll remember some of the greatest people of early America, like Henry Ford, Thomas Edison, the Wright brothers, and Noah Webster. These are the brilliant minds that built and shaped America into what it is today. Because of Henry Ford's creation of Greenfield Village, we're able to travel back in time to when life was simpler and great minds were hard at work. Thanks everyone for stepping back in time with me here at the Henry Fords Greenfield Village. I hope you really enjoyed this historical tour of America and its past 300 years or so. If you did, you can find more amazing content just like this by joining one of the links that's in the description box or on screen for my channel memberships or Patreon. And then you can like, comment, subscribe, and I will see you on another episode, everyone. Bye.